getting close to going live. You got the ball, Brent?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, just about live. It's still starting. There we go. We are now live. So today's presentation is staying out of harm's way. Brent Okeson is here with us today to talk about that important subject. Brent.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about some things to avoid hazards in the workplace and in our everyday lives, and things that we can do to keep ourselves from getting hit by or hurt by something else. And a lot of that is awareness. So we're going to talk about some awareness today and things that we can do to avoid different hazards there. So what we want to look at is some of the focus hazards that OSHA has. They have this thing called the Fatal 4 or the Focus 4. And today we want to focus on two of those things. One is struck by and hit by hazards, things we could be struck by, hit by, or hurt by, and also things that we can be caught in or between. And these are the two areas we want to focus on today and look at some claims that have happened and things that we can do to avoid having an injury from these types of things. So the other focus 4 items, I'll just mention those. One is falls and one is electrocution hazards, and this is in construction. But these two we're going to focus on today: struck by, hit by, and caught in or between. In 2018, OSHA identified this as causing 16% of their fatalities in OSHA construction, being hit by something else or pinned or caught in between something where somebody was injured or killed. And so we want to look at that today. We want to learn to prevent those things. And hopefully this will raise awareness to the different types of hazards that you're around, whatever type of work you're doing or where you're going, where you're standing. Any place that you are, will raise awareness to these today. So let's look at this now. What is a struck by or hit by hazard? What does that mean? It's forcible contact or impact between the injured person and an object or piece of equipment. So you're hit or struck by something in motion that contacts you or injures you from being struck or hit by. What does caught in between mean? Caught in or between. It is injuries resulting from a person being squeezed, caught, crushed, pinched, or compressed between two or more objects or between parts of an object. So it could be moving equipment, it could be things moving around in motion, such as this picture here. You have a backhoe or a track hoe that's moving up against somebody that's against another barrier or a wall, and they get caught or crushed or pinched in between there. That's an example of something we could be caught in between. So we're going to look at those, but the key thing we want to look at is both of these types of hazards are things that are in motion, things that are moving around in motion. So to be struck by or hit by something, the object in motion, it could be something in the air, something that's flying around, something that's airborne that is in the air that hits you. It could be something from above that falls from above and lands on you and injures you that way. Something rotating, something moving around or swinging around. This could be equipment or machinery, things that are moving around you on a job site or in the workplace. Even things that are rolling. They could roll into you and injure you that way. But to be struck by something, it has to be in motion, and that's what we want to raise awareness to. To be caught in between or caught in or between something, it's also in motion. So it could be falling materials that fall on top of you and crush you. It could be moving vehicles and equipment that are moving around that you get caught in or between. Any type of machinery, anything that you're working around that you can get caught in. It could be any body part. It could be your hand. It could be your fingers that get caught in between things, or your entire body. Really anything that's in the way of something that's in motion. So we want to raise awareness to that today and hopefully prevent some accidents and injuries from being aware of those things in motion. So here at the Trust, I took a look at the claims in the past 3 years, what's causing most of our work comp injuries, and no surprise, usually it's strains that are the top one, and falls and slips, trip, slips, and falls are right there. Number 2, that's usually every year what we see. Surprisingly, number 3, the top 3 cause is being struck or injured by something. And so that's why we're looking at this today. We want to prevent these struck or hit by or caught in between hazards that are happening. And this was for each of the 3 years. The past 3 years, each of those years, this was the number 3 cause of work comp claims here at the Trust. So let's take a look at some examples. Let's look at what is causing some of these struck by claims. Here's some real examples of what happened here in the state. So we had a ladder that fell. There was an employee working in an area, and ladder was up against a wall nearby, and it fell and landed on top of the employee, which hurt their head and their back. They had an injury from the impact of being struck by the ladder. There was a metal vault lid. So employees were lifting a metal vault lid. The lid accidentally dropped and landed on top of their right foot and crushed their foot, caused an injury to their foot on that. There was an employee working on a lawnmower. It was a riding lawnmower. And as he was riding along, for some reason that mower jerked and the employee fell off and the mower ran over him. And you can imagine how bad that might be, being struck or hit by a moving riding lawnmower. We had employees that were loading a log into a chipper. And as the log was being put in there, it got pulled and the employee was struck in the head by the log as it was pulled into that chipper. And another example is a post pounder. So we had employees installing a new stop sign and they were using this fence post pounder, and two of them together, as they're pulling down on it and up and down to pound that post in, the pounder came off and it ended up hitting the employee in the head, causing an injury. And surprisingly, we've seen quite a few of those injuries from post pounders. You know, you get working hard on something, you got tools and equipment in motion, you're moving things around, and sometimes people get hit or struck by those things. But these are real examples of what causes injuries as things are moved around and struck by and hit by things. So what are people getting caught in between? Here's some examples of some caught in between claims that happened in the last few years. We had employees moving a cinder block, such as what is pictured here. And as they were moving it, there was a nearby board that their finger got between. And as they moved this cinder block, it smashed their finger. They were smashed and crushed in between the cinder block and the board, causing an injury to their finger. We had an employee that was doing some maintenance on a mower, and it was elevated on a jack. And as his hands were under there working on things, it fell off of the jack, it slipped off, and ended up crushing his hand from the mower crushing it, being caught between that. There was a golf cart where employees were moving golf carts around, and one employee had their ankle for some reason outside of the golf cart, and as they moved it, there was an adjacent golf cart that it got pinned between as they moved it in there, and it caused an injury to their ankle. We had a 50-gallon drum that employees were moving around, a really heavy drum, and it slipped off and landed on the employee's toe and crushed their toe. And the last example is a boulder. We had employees putting together a bike trail and working on a hillside on the bike trail when a boulder up above came loose and rolled down on top of their leg, crushing and injuring their leg. Some really bad injuries. Bad things can happen with heavy materials, with moving things around. When things are in motion, we can be caught in between those things, and we're hopefully raising awareness to that today, how to prevent those. So it comes down to motion. To be struck or hit by or to be caught in something, there has to be something moving around, and we could get tangled up in it or we could be hit by it, but we need to be aware of what is in motion around me. What is it out there that's moving around that can get me? These are some of the large obvious ones here. You could have some large equipment moving around a job site, like a large backhoe or tractors, heavy equipment of such that you could be hit by. And unfortunately, you know, it happens. People get hit by these things. We had an employee 2 years ago that lost their life, unfortunately, from standing close to a track hoe, and the operator didn't know that he was there, and it ended up running over the employee and killing them. So we have to be aware of what's around us, and we need to have some space there. It could be forklifts. Could be forklifts moving around that you get hit or struck by or crushed by. Large trucks, large trailers, those are things to be aware of, and realize that we could be hit or struck by those. Even the swing radius. This is something on equipment or any type of machinery that you're working around. There are things that can spin around and swing around, and you don't want to put yourself in a tough situation where you might be inside of that swing radius area where you could be hit. Such as the picture here where the machine spins around, hits the employee, and pushes them into some type of barrier or physical thing that they're smashed against. So be aware of that. Even on large equipment where there's a backhoe or a track hoe, they have that arm that extends out, and you don't want to be standing inside of that swing radius where it could come around really fast and hit you. So if you can, stay clear of those areas and be aware of those things that are in motion that could spin around and get you. Traffic is another thing. If you're working near roadways, or if you're walking out in a crosswalk, or you're on a sidewalk, you need to be aware of traffic that's coming at you and around you. Vehicles are something that people get hit by. You know, they go really fast. Sometimes they're hard to see, and sometimes you, the pedestrian, can be hard to see, even on on the sides of roads and places. So be aware, always have your constant awareness up around the vehicles that are moving around you at all times there. Here's an example of some falling objects, things that might hit us. So we have some employees throwing some things down, and you can see it actually accidentally hits the guy in the head because he's not paying attention. He looked away and got hit by it. And so that reminds us that there are overhead things that can fall and hit us. Gravity is a constant. And so if somebody's working overhead and you walk into an area where people are, be aware, look up and see what's up above you, see what's moving around, if there's anything in motion. There might be overhead objects that fall. There could be tools or equipment or materials. Lots of things can fall when people are working overhead. So keep those areas clear, and definitely take caution as you walk around paying attention to what's overhead, so you don't get hit by something above your head. Other things to watch for are things that could topple over or fall, such as unbalanced loads. Could be materials that are stacked up, or maybe they're not stacked properly where they're stable. They could topple over and fall on top of you or injure you that way. It could be in storage areas, or it could be moving things around. And another example might be a forklift that has a load on it that's not properly balanced and not secured. That could easily topple over if it's not balanced properly and hit you. And so you need to be aware of that. You know, what's moving around, what's potentially there that could fall over and hit me, with what you could be struck by or hit by. Other things to be aware of are, what are people doing around you? When you go into a place to work, or whether it's anywhere you go in the workplace, think about who's there and what are they doing. Is there any power tools being used? Are there any things in motion? Is there anything I need to stand clear of? Might even be material handling and just paying attention to what others are doing around you. Watching the actions of others and being aware and having that awareness can help avoid those accidents. Another type of thing that could be in motion is stored energy. If you're working around any kind of a pressurized system, something that could release pressure or bleed off pressure, or maybe there's system components that fail and it releases pressure, you could be hit or struck by those kind of things as well. Could be a water system, could be chemicals, compressed air. If you have air that's released and compressed air that's used, you can be hit by objects or hit by that air itself, and even hydraulics. So watch for things that store energy, watch for things that could release some type of energy or pressure that you could be hit by. Here's another example, the flying debris and materials. So for example, cutting and grinding and using a grinder, it kicks up sparks, it puts things into air and motion, and those are things that you can be hit by. This happened to me one time. I was working with my dad on some steel pipe, and at the time I wasn't aware of the angle that he was grinding at. I was off doing some other things, and I kind of turned around to see what was going on and what he was doing. And I turned around and he had changed his angle without me knowing, and ended up having these sparks and materials come flying at me and hit me right in the head. So it reminded me that, I need to be aware of my surroundings. If somebody's moving around, if they're using power tools or anything in motion around me, I need to be aware and make sure that I'm not in harm's way from those things that could be flying in the air. So watch for those, any type of flying debris or any type of material that could be airborne that could hit you. Another example is pressure washing. We've seen claims and injuries from this as well, where an employee is spraying off surfaces with a pressure washer. And as they're doing that, it's kicking up debris and particles and little materials that can become airborne and hit you as well. So be aware of those different hazards of things that are flying around on the job sites. Another hazard, something that you could get caught in or caught in between, is unguarded machinery. There could be any kind of rotating part, any kind of machinery that's there that you could get caught up in or pinched or pinned between. An example of this is where there's machinery that's lacking covers. When the covers have been removed and they're not put back on, things are in the open moving around that you can get caught up in. So it could be chains, it could be pulleys, it could be spinning wheels, saw blades, any type of thing that's moving that's uncovered or unguarded. You need to watch for those, that you don't get caught up in those and have an injury from that. Sometimes they can even pull you in. If your clothing were to catch on these things, it can pull you in as they spin around. So stay clear of those. Make sure things are covered and guarded, that you don't get caught in or between something like that. Another really important thing to watch is cars as they're moving around you. Parking lots is something where you really want to have your awareness up And think about, as somebody's backing out of their parking space, make sure that they see you. Don't just walk right behind them and assume that they see you. Take some time and think about where you walk. Think about the paths that you take. If there's different entrance points or access areas, staying on certain walkways or staying to one side that's safe, that's really important to do, that you don't get backed up over or hit by a car in the parking lot. So watch for those things. Here's an example of somebody that's struck by a moving car. So an example there, and that just reminds us not to put ourselves in harm's way. Don't assume that the other person sees you, and don't stand there. Don't stand in the way where there's going to be cars or vehicles or equipment or things moving around that could bump into you. It's just not worth putting yourself in harm's way and taking that risk. You don't want to be struck by it. So one of the things that we talk about in a lot of our trainings is called situational awareness. And this is something that you can do that might save your life, and it might really help you from having an injury. And part of this is just staying alert, being aware of your surroundings, recognizing hazards that are going on, being aware of everything moving around, and having that awareness that you can keep yourself safe. And it's kind of common sense. It's kind of, some people have a little more common sense than others, but you've got to have that awareness up. Some people might even recognize these hazards better than others, but you've got to stay focused and stay alert to what's around you at all times. And that would be asking yourself certain questions when you walk into an area where something's going on or when things are moving around. Ask yourself, is anything moving around? Is there anything that I could get in the way of that could hurt me? Is there anything in motion? Is there anything in the air? Is there anything that could fall? Is there any machinery or things moving around? Any cars? Is there anything in motion around me? Ask yourself, who is nearby? What are they doing? What could get me? What is it, that one thing that could get me that I could get hurt by? Asking yourself those questions and being alert and aware can help avoid those injuries from being struck by or hit by or caught in between things. Really helps you with those things. So I look at this picture, and this reminds me of one of my favorite TV shows, AFV, America's Funniest Home Videos. And they're really funny, but a lot of times I'm surprised that so many injuries happen when kids are hitting piñatas. And piñatas are a lot of fun, but oftentimes there's a dad or a grandpa that hands the baton to the little kid or a stick to the kid and says, okay, give that piñata a whack. Well, they're usually standing right in the way, and sometimes the dad and the grandpa are the bystanders that get hit by the baton, and the kid has no idea because they're blindfolded. And so it just reminds us that we need to be aware of where we stand, where we put ourselves. Don't put yourself in a tough situation. Don't walk into an area where there's a hazard. Use your common sense, be aware, and realize that there's some things that you could be hit or struck by. It's just not worth putting yourself in harm's way. So just that awareness and where you put yourself can avoid a struck by or a hit by or caught in between hazard. Here's another reminder for us. Again, not to put ourselves in harm's way. Don't do dumb things. Don't take chances, such as these boys did here. You can see how that happened there. It reminds me of a time when I was playing Little League Baseball and we were in the dugout, and one of my teammates was thinking he would warm up in the dugout and start swinging the bat around. And me being a right-handed batter, I stood on one side of him, didn't realize he was going to be swinging, and I was kind of behind him, and he didn't know I was there. Turns out he was a lefty, and so he swings the bat the other direction, and I had no idea that he'd be swinging that bat. And so guess what happened? I ended up getting whacked by the baseball bat in the dugout. And it just is a good reminder that you don't know what somebody's going to do. You don't know what could be moving around. It may swing a different direction. It may come at you from a different angle, but we have to be aware of what's around us, even in baseball. So let's watch for things like that. One thing that you can do to prevent being hit or struck by something is make sure that people see you, especially cars that are moving around. You don't want to assume. Just don't assume that the other person sees you. Make sure that they do, and you want to confirm that they see you. So if you're going to walk out in a crosswalk, or if you're going to go in front of a car and cross traffic, make sure they see you. Sometimes a simple wave. If you wave at somebody and wait for them to wave back, you can make eye contact, and there's some kind of communication that it's clear and safe for you to pass. It's good to do that, especially around cars, especially around large, heavy equipment. Make sure that they see you, and wait just a second. Just wait just a second before you go to move. Make sure they see you before you go running out there. That's something that might save your life. Just that extra second of awareness and confirming that that they do see you, that you're not in harm's way. Another thing you can do is your personal protective equipment. We talk about this in a lot of different trainings, and it really does help, especially for avoiding being struck by or hit by something, such as working in traffic, working on a roadway, or around moving equipment on a job site. It's required that you have a high visibility traffic vest so that they can see you. As you can see, it's bright, it's got reflective material. It can really help those operators and drivers to make sure that they see you there, and it might save your life from wearing that when you're supposed to. So you want to protect yourself. It might be safety glasses that help you from getting hit in the eye by flying materials or debris. Could be a hard hat that prevents an impact to your head from overhead falling objects, or a face shield as you're grinding to keep those things from hitting you in the face. Maybe even steel toe boots that prevent your foot and toes from getting crushed as you're moving things around. PPE can really help from those impact hazards, those struck by and hit by hazards. So it comes down to awareness, and a lot of that is just being aware of your surroundings, paying attention. So to summarize, we want to do that. We want to make sure we know what's moving around us. As we talked about struck by, hit by, and caught in between hazards, it's things that are in motion that cause those different hazards. So make sure that you're aware of what's moving around you at all times. Recognize those hazards and keep your awareness up. That will really help. And don't put yourself in harm's way. Don't take chances. Don't walk out in front of cars. Don't stand under things that could fall on you. Just be aware and keep yourself safe. We want to raise awareness to that today, and hopefully that helps everybody to stay safe and avoid accident and injury today. So with that, that's a summary. Any questions that we have out there today?
We don't have any questions quite yet, folks. Go ahead and type those into the chat box, and we'll get those to Brent right now so we can answer those. This topic makes me cringe. And it kind of like when we're reading the new claims that come in each day, and I'll see one where it says worker was in the trench putting a pipe in place, and they got their finger between the bucket of the backhoe and the pipe, and it just makes me cringe. These are things that are pretty easy to if you're not paying attention, to just get your hand in the wrong spot, but it could be your head or anything else. Looking there, not seeing questions or comments. You've covered the subject well. What's the final word, Brent?
Thank you. Everybody be aware. It's just constant awareness and staying safe to things moving around, and hopefully everybody stays safe and has a great day.
Great. Hey, Brent, we did have a request to go back one page in the PowerPoint.
Go to there.
They didn't say which one. They said one page.
Equipment, staying visible.
Maybe hit the summary page there.
Pay attention, recognize the hazards.
Awesome.
Everybody have a safe day. Thank you.